Hi, this is the module Elements within DataMiner Configurator Level 1. And in this module, we'll effectively add our first element to our DataMiner system. So let's take a look at that. Before doing that, we will first take a look at the different actions that are available on an element, editing, deleting, these kind of things, and then jump into creating an element and effectively create our first elements. We'll take a closer look at all the settings around that as well. And the stream viewer will help us out to verify the actual communication, the polling data going back and forwards to the element. So if something is not running okay there, we will see that in the stream viewer. That helps us out to debug and troubleshoot the communication to the actual data source. And then we'll also take a look how to export and import elements. So we will be able to export like a whole series of elements. You can do that in a package to move a package towards like a production system, for instance, or to another DataMiner system. But you could also use that, for instance, to import it again on the same system and duplicate elements. For instance, bulk editing can also be done. So those are two use cases for exporting and importing, which we will take a look at. So first things first, the element actions. Let's take a look at what we can do with an element. That's available in the right-click menu, so you can right-click anywhere in your surveyor tree structure, or you can also open up the view card. Here we are on a view card. Below this view section there, you see the list of elements there as well. Also there you can right-click on your elements to see that editing or actions menu there. So it's the same menu if you right-click in the surveyor or if you right-click in the view card. So we can of course edit an element further, tweak it, change the name or whatever we want to change to that element. We can of course do a delete. We can do a duplicate if we need to add multiple of the same elements or more or less of the same elements. We can easily duplicate that as well. And a rename is just a shortcut in here as well. But we will go for a new element as a first exercise, where we will go for a new element, and there are some other items we can add. That's more for later on. So the new element is what we will be looking at right now. Creating elements. So somewhere in our, I'll do it on our DAS system, we will right-click. So be aware if you do it, well, you can do it also here in the context menu or the card menu or in the surveyor. It will immediately create it in that selected view, of course. So if you want to immediately make sure that it's positioned somewhere correctly, go to that correct view and then right-click somewhere in that view or in that card of that view to add your element inside that specific view. So we go for add new element in there, and then we will see the edit wizards. So the new or edit wizard is the same thing. If you add a new element, then it's completely blank. If you edit an existing element, you will already see all the details of your element in there, and you can further fine-tune it. In this case, I do see here a device in Brussels, and the basic details that are indicated here at the top, the first two sections are the basics, you could say. That's the name of the element, which needs to be unique throughout the system so that we can uniquely identify our element. There is an optional description you can add, and then we also have the possibility to choose our DataMiner agent that is going to do the management of this element. In this case, it's grayed out because we only have one DMA in the system, so we don't have any choice here. If you have multiple DMAs in a system, you can choose the DataMiner, or then you can later on move it from one agent to another agent. Replicate, I'll come back to that later on. That's a special kind of thing to replicate elements between DataMiner agents, a little bit more advanced, so don't worry about that now. So the only thing we have done so far is specified a name, and then the next section is the device details, where I basically need to specify which kind of device or element I'm adding. The connector. We just saw the connectors in the previous module. where we were able to add new connectors to the system via the catalog. So here you need to choose, is it a Microsoft server or a Linux server? Is it a Cisco switch or an Arista switch? So you basically define which kind of element you are adding in the DataMiner system. As soon as you select your protocol or connector, it will automatically choose the production version. I mentioned it before, always go for production version. Just use production version. That's the standard, you could say. Don't go for specific versions because you don't want to ever change this again. Just point to the version that you find is good for production, and this can change over time, the production pointer. Next to that, we also have an alarm and trend template we can immediately define. We didn't configure or create any alarm or trend templates yet, so I don't really worry about that for now. We'll talk about that later on. So I just specify the name and the type of device in there. Okay, the next section is then depending on which kind of connector you chose. So if you chose, for instance, a Cisco switch using SNMP, there will be SNMP details that need to be populated. In this case, it's more like a proprietary protocol that can go over serial or TCP/IP, or it could be a GPIB for Spectrum. Or so depending on what you choose there will potentially be different options below that. Let's take a look at the different options we have. So the first one we have there is for Philips, we have the TCP/IP, and you can specify the IP address and the port. So next to TCP/IP, there is potentially also a possibility, depending on the connector that you chose, to go over UDP or directly over serial, if there would be a serial port on this machine. But typically you go over IP to a specific port. If it would be serial, you also have like start bits, stop bits kind of things in there in the more serial settings there. Under more TCP/IP settings, the network auto, if there would be multiple network card interfaces, it is possible to choose that, but auto should be doing the job with the routing table if that is all correctly configured. So don't worry too much about that. So we just specify the IP. On the right-hand side, we have an example for SNMP. So depending if the device supports SNMP v1, 2, or 3, you might have different options on the SNMP version. And there might also be then some configuration that needs to be done on, for instance, the get community string, the set community string, or potentially some other security settings with SNMP v3, which has some better security on board. GPIB is more for Spectrum elements. Now, next to that IP address, so we're just going to be adding a device and we'll be adding an IP address. But in the more settings, we do also see some timeout settings. Let's take a quick look at the timeout settings we have there. So the first thing I have is a timeout on a single command, which has a default. Now, all the default values you will have in these kind of wizards come from the driver, from the connector. So the connector can already specify, yeah, maybe it needs to be 1500 milliseconds or 3000 or 10,000 or whatever. It is possible. Like in this case, this is a more binary low-level communication mechanism with this device, so 1500 is fine. But sometimes, like with WMI to a Microsoft server, we need to query the event viewer, and this can take some time before the element will actually return a larger table. So therefore, it is possible that the command or the timeout of a single command could maybe be 10, 20, 30 seconds. So if the driver is defining something bigger, please leave it like that. There is a reason why they specified a larger timeout. So this is for a single command. If it would not return a response, it would do a number of retries. So you can specify the retries, 3 retries there. If we don't get an answer after 1500 milliseconds, it does a retry 3 times. And if it continues to do so, and the next command is also failing again 3 times, and next one, And then eventually we can say that the element must go into timeout state when it's not responding, when it's the commands are not responding anymore for 30 seconds. So I can lose a couple of commands, but if it continues to lose commands and doesn't respond anymore, and somebody unplugged the cable from that element, then after 30 seconds, it will go into timeout if you effectively include the timeout. You could not include it as well. There you can see on the upper right hand side what will happen after 30 seconds. We will no longer indicate a normal, warning, minor, major, critical kind of indication, but we will put an orange cross there and we will say like, we don't know anymore. The element is no longer responding, so we have no clue what is happening there. Maybe it's still doing a perfect job, but we're just not able to communicate with it anymore. Maybe it just completely died and it's completely gone from the network and it's no longer doing its job. We don't really know what is happening there. So that is the timeout alarm that is indicated here after 30 seconds. So as indicated in the warning, be careful with those timeout settings that you are not generating false timeouts, you could say, when by setting a short single command timeout or something like that. A small note on the include timeout. There is a possibility that a connector is using multiple communication paths to specific elements. Just as a fictive example, you could be communicating SNMP to an element, and you could also be communicating via a REST API. Certain bits and pieces we get via SNMP, certain bits and pieces we're getting via a web API. It is possible to define then that you will have two of these sections here to say like, yeah, I want to include the timeouts on the web API, but not on SNMP, because maybe the SNMP sometimes it's not working that well, and maybe sometimes giving timeouts. But if I'm still able to communicate via the web API, then the device is still there doing the job. So that's more the reason why you would exclude certain timeouts if you more have multiple of those communication timeouts or communication mechanisms or connections. Okay, so that's a single command timeout, and after 30 seconds going into timeout when 30 seconds I get no response. Underneath the advanced, so we were looking at the more TCP/IP or SNMP settings there for a certain connection. We do also have this advanced element settings window. Let's take a quick look at some of those settings here. The first one, I don't need to worry too much about it. It's the slow poll settings. It can come in handy when you have elements that are like daisy chained on the same connection, like a bus, for instance. Then it is possible if one of the elements go into timeout, it's basically occupying the bus for a lengthy timeout period each time, because a timeout is a quite lengthy timeout. While normal communication should reply within milliseconds, the timeout suddenly is 1,500 milliseconds. That's ages, you could say. So therefore, one element going into timeout could impact the communication with other elements on that same bus. Well, therefore, you could say if it uses this kind of mechanism, you can activate a slow poll, and then basically after a number of seconds or a number of timeouts, you can force it into slow poll, and then it will only do a ping now and then. Like, is it already replying again, the element? Do we already get a response back? And then it will wait again for 30 seconds and then start again in 30 seconds later to check if it's back okay. So then it doesn't occupy the bus for 30 seconds each time in between. Otherwise, it would continuously try to poll the element while it is not there anymore. So slow poll, it is typically only happening for specific bus systems, you could say, or daisy-chained systems. The SNMP agent is also a little bit more a special case. That's when you want to enable a virtual SNMP agent northbound. So any of the elements you're you're polling and you're retrieving the information from, you can also virtualize them northbound with a virtual SNMP agent. So it's perfectly possible to talk to a serial device, for instance, and convert that and expose those parameters that we are retrieving via serial towards northbound SNMP SNMP interface there. Therefore, we need to create an IP address, a virtual IP address, and DataMiner will create this IP address, and you will be able to do gets and sets on there. So you would be able to just northbound say, give me or do a SNMP get of the audio output level, and it will return back the audio output level for that Philips device that we have been using already in the exercises before, actually coming from a serial device. Also, you can do that with any protocol or any connector. You can potentially virtualize that northbound with a virtual SNMP agent. By default, this is not enabled because it does require an additional IP address for every element you want to activate this for. And there is a possibility to define the community string get and set, a little bit like the password to do the gets and sets on this virtual SNMP agent. What else do we have there? The hidden option. The hidden option is when we add an element, by default, it is shown in the surveyor and it's shown in the cards. But you could also make it a little bit more hidden, then it won't be shown in the surveyor and only optionally shown in the element cards or in the view cards whenever you activate the filtering to show hidden elements. Typically, that's being used for elements that are not necessarily needed for daily operations. So we want to hide it a little bit more away and to put it a little bit more on the background. Sometimes this is done for elements reading out contact closures, for instance, all kinds of contact closures, which are again translated to other elements, and the other elements are actually the ones that are showing the useful information, and those in-between elements is something we don't really worry about because they only show me raw data. So we can take the raw data from context closures and then copy it to elements that are giving a better representation of the parameters that we want to see in the system. It's a little bit more a special case. Read-only is an interesting one because we'll see later on that security, you can define all the security you want. You can define like, oh, this person can only see this view or can only see that element, and oh, he only has read access to the element, or he can do effectively settings on there, yes or no. So you can configure all these things when a person can or cannot set or do settings on an element. Well, why do we have the read-only option there then? Well, this is not really about security because security is insecurity. This is more to hard code it into the system that it's read-only. And a use case would be that you do have, for instance, let's say just simply a switch, and you want this switch to be monitored in the DataMiner system, but actually this switch is managed by another team or another company, and we should never do any settings on there. Well, therefore, you can basically add the element in DataMiner as read-only, and then it means that DataMiner will never be able to do any settings on the elements. So you will never be able to change an interface, the admin state, or the VLAN table or whatever. You won't be able to do any of those settings. Even if you are a super administrator, you won't be able to do it. It's hard-coded, embedded into the element. You added the element read-only, nothing else. I don't care about security. It's read-only. It's hard-coded. That's the read-only option. When you add the element, is it immediately active, paused, or stopped? By default, it is active. Okay, so those are some more advanced options. We don't need to worry too much about all of them. But what I will then do is immediately create an example after we looked at this last two pages. So we were looking at the edit page. If we click on the next, you will go to the views page. It will by default select already your view that you have right clicked on, in which view card you are or where in the surveyor you right clicked. It is potentially possible to add an element in multiple views. So you can add some more checkboxes there. So you can add one element in multiple views that is supported in the DataMiner system. So you can add it in Europe and in USA, which is not very logical, but you can add it in Europe and maybe another view with, for instance, all the modulators. You can also add it in there. So that sounds more logical. The next page then gives us also an overview of the properties like the class, gold, silver, bronze. You can immediately define that while creating the element, and then we just create the element. Let's do that with an exercise. I will do that on my brand new DAS system that I was spinning up during that first module there, the fundamentals. Okay, so I do have already one element on there. I will just create my own element next to that, which is kind of the same thing, but it doesn't really matter. It's an exercise. So you can immediately right click on any of the views there. I don't have that many views, but let's maybe add it in the DataMiner catalog just for fun. So I right click on the DataMiner catalog and go for a new element in there. And it starts with the wizard there. So Bert underscore training underscore ms. I'm gonna create a Microsoft element. Yeah, you can also use spaces. I use now underscores. Let's maybe use spaces. That's supported as well. But it needs to be unique. Okay, I just give it a name. I don't worry too much about the description or which node it's on because I only have one. And I'm going to go for that Microsoft platform from the protocols dropdown. Whenever I select Microsoft platform, it automatically selects the production version and it loads all the necessary other settings that I need to define for this chosen connector. So I chose Microsoft platform, therefore it popped up with the settings below there. Alarm and trend template. If you want, you can already select something if something is already in there. I don't have anything yet, so I'll come back to that later on when creating an alarm and trend templates. Okay, so port is TCP IP. Yes, no other choices. And the IP address, well, I will go for a local host or a 127.0.0.1. Okay, just a quick peek at the timeout settings. We will see that the timeout settings are a little bit higher for this Microsoft platform. Okay, I'm fine with that. I'll follow the suggestion of the developer. And below the advanced, there you have some more advanced options, which we don't really need in general. So typically, I don't need to worry about too much about those things, except for some of those more advanced special cases. So only the name, Microsoft platform, and the IP address. That's the only thing I had to specify here. So I can click on the next on the right-hand side, or I can also use the tab pages to go to the next one. So it's going to add it into that DataMiner catalog view. That's perfectly fine. Hit on next or go to properties. We don't have any properties on my blank system here. So if I would have done it on the training system, you would have had the class property there. Okay, that's good. I can just create it now. Click on create and it will immediately add this to the training or to the DataMiner catalog view that I chose and start pulling the information. So you can already see information is coming in step by step. It starts to populate the user interface. So that's how easy it is to add a new element to your DataMiner system. That's it. Okay, so there was one thing that I skipped in the wizard, and that is that replication option there. What is that replicate? Well, if I go for that replicate checkbox, it will add a section here, a new section, that allows me to connect to another DataMiner system with a username and a password, and then it will retrieve the elements and I can choose an element from another system. Well, what it will do, it will basically replicate or copy or mimic, you could say, that chosen element from that other system onto your system here. So this is more a special situation where you have multiple DataMiner systems, and you want this specific element to be present in more than one DataMiner system. If you have two DataMiner systems, you could say like, yeah, just add it on both systems. Indeed, you could do that. The only problem or downside you have is if you add it on both DataMiner systems, they will both be polling the elements. And remember that I mentioned before, if you are polling too fast on one of those elements, it is possible that the element will suffer, and there is a certain load on the CPU, there is a certain load on that interface. Sometimes the CPU used for the management interface is not that powerful. So we have to be careful, not in all cases, but in some cases, you really have to be careful not to poll the element too much. Therefore, you can replicate it. So one DataMiner system is doing the actual polling of the element, and the other system, I'm not going to add it again, but I'm just going to point to the other DataMiner system, say like, over there you already have it with this username and password, you can connect, let's retrieve it, and we'll have exactly the same thing as on the other system. Sometimes this is used where you have like regional DataMiner systems, and then you could have like a top-level system, and the top-level system could replicate information from the regional systems. That's like a use case that can happen. So do note that whenever you are replicating an element, the protocol will automatically be selected, and it must be present on both systems. And I can choose actually a different alarm template on the different systems. So here you have two elements, so they are both showing the same values, so they are replicating, but one is, for instance, in green, the other one is not in green, so the monitoring could be different on both systems. So keep that in mind. Don't overpoll an element. Be careful with polling too much. If you need it on different DataMiner systems, think about that replication of an element that is possible. Okay. So I created my Microsoft element, but I want to make sure that my communication is okay. It was a kind of obvious because all the values were coming in, so I think everything was indeed okay. But if it would not come in, where can I see what kind of error I'm getting back from the element? Well, therefore you can right-click on your element or use the card menu. That's the same menu, and you go to View, Stream Viewer, and it will give you a pop-up with the Stream Viewer. The Stream Viewer is the actual raw data, the raw communication being sent out from the DataMiner node to the element to retrieve the information and the response that comes back from the actual data source. So there you can see the raw communication, and there you could potentially see, oh, it's not responding, it's a timeout. So maybe I need to check the IP settings, or maybe there's an access denied. Maybe I need to verify something with the security settings, or maybe there are other errors that the element is throwing, SNMP errors or whatever kind of things that are being possible. So depending on the type of device or depending on the connector, it will show different data coming back there. So let's take a look at that. So I just created my BERT training Microsoft, so I can just right click on there and I can go to View, Stream Viewer, and I will see, note that it might take a second before it starts to show that information. That is because there are certain timers in a driver. I didn't really discuss that yet, but in a driver, there will be timers that start the polling. And typically you have several timers. you have a timer which is going very fast. For instance, like some key performance indicators like CPU, memory, those things I want them very frequently updated. While another one like let's say the software version or the operating system version, only once in a while this should be sufficient. So there are when a developer is creating a driver or a connector, it will make sure that the important parameters are frequently updated and less important parameters less frequently, and other parameters even less frequently. Therefore, they can really consume the resources that we have for the important stuff that we want to frequently update. So this is the stream viewer. So it shows me a little bit like, let me just freeze it for a moment, like a kind of SQL queries, select handle account from Win32 performance raw data, etc. So those are WMI queries, Windows Management Instrumentation Protocol. So you can freeze, you can capture it, you can save it, you can clear it. Those are some of the options. You can also do a little search in there. I do have another example on the training system we were using before. Let's go for one of those Philips devices. If we take a look, that's the one in the slides as well. If we go for view stream viewer, you will see that this is a more serial binary kind of protocol. It is ASCII readable. So yeah, that's maybe interesting to just say. Let's freeze it for a moment. Do we have something over here, for instance? So you will see that there are some arrows that are pointing outside of the window. That means that we are basically sending something to the actual element, to the actual device or the service. And in this case, we are sending, that's the time here. There is a description that we have in the driver, the P14, the parameter 14 or program or whatever 14. This is the binary information that we send, and this is ASCII. So it's actually human readable here, and this is just a byte counter. And we can see that immediately we have a response back. So it's coming in, that's an incoming response on that P14 with some more details. Check device descrambler, it's like giving me some more information there back. Not all of it might be human readable, but in this case, there is some human readable stuff in there. The groups are the timers, and the groups are just some internals of the protocol. So the protocol is using groups and timers, and it's all on one connection. So SNMP and web could be, for instance, a web API could be two connections that are added next to each other here. And you would see the SNMP communication next to the web API next to each other. Another quick example just on just show you that there are different possibilities is here the Cisco. Here it shows you SNMP gets, so all the gets getting a chassis minor alarm is 1 or something else, and then it will also show you some tables in there as well. So those are tables. If you see some of these things, these are, for instance, here a port table. So a port table is basically going to retrieve all the rows and all the cells in there row by row. So that's what you see there passing by. So that's a little bit of a quick view on the communication. So like I said, there it might be convenient to have a little look at the actual communication if you are not seeing the data that you are expecting. Also, if you do, for instance, a firmware upgrade and suddenly certain parameters are not coming in anymore, that's also a thing where you can look at, and potentially the developer could ask you to save this to further investigate it, or to open up a sniffer session for a longer period of time. So all of that is also documented in our docs, of course. So you get the basics. There you can have a quick peek at the actual communication. Okay, so we added one element, so now we can add more elements and we can start building our system. But there is also a possibility to export elements and then import them back again. Like I mentioned during the introduction, there are two ways of exporting. So you have the DM import here and the CSV. Let's take a look at that. So you can go into your surveyor, or you can go to a specific view, and in the card you can just go to Actions Export. So just to show you, you can right click on any of the views, for instance, or not the fundamentals anymore, the configurator level. So you can select this view, or just right click on that view and go for Actions Export Import there. The same thing happens here in that card menu. There you can also go for Actions Export Import. But we are exporting the whole view here, configurator level. Or you can also go for a lower level as well, of course. So in here, we're selecting the IRDs view and we're going for an export. But as I said, there are two exports possible. So let's take a closer look at that. The first export is a DM import package that will be created. I mentioned that we have file extensions, DM, DataMiner, and then DM protocol, DM upgrade, and here we have DM import. So it is possible to export a part of your DataMiner system in a package, and that package, what will it include? Well, everything you select here. You can say here, oh, I selected my IRDs view, so I select my view, my elements in there. There's only one element actually. It will must also include immediately the driver that is being used with the alarm and trend template, the Visio file that is being used, so documents, and do I already want the existing alarms and trend data to be moved along with it, yes or no? So you can activate that as well. So you can basically export everything, including the alarms and the whole trend history and everything, and move it to another system. Or maybe you have this kind of like staging environment and you create a nice view there, you make a nice Visio for it, you've built some elements there with some switching and some automation scripts and everything, and after you completely finished your work on the staging system, you're ready to go to production. Well, you right click on that view, you say export to a package, it will create that package. Maybe then I don't want to include the alarms because I did a lot of alarm testing on the staging system and the trend data as well. This was just staging, so I'm not going to include the alarm and trend data, maybe not even the documents as well. I'm just interested in the protocols, the alarm templates, the Visios, the whole view structure with all the elements there, all of these elements, put it in a package, and then I can go to my production environment and just load it in there into the production system. So that's the first export I can do. The second export is a CSV file, or potentially also clipboard and print. I'm not going to go through to the other options. I'm only worried about one thing. That's the all data, the CSV, into a CSV. CSV into CSV. That's the only thing you can play around with. The others, that's the only thing which is really mattering and important here. So I export all the CSV data into a CSV file. What basically happens, it will export all the elements of the selected view and have all the properties and all the settings of the element into all the different columns into that CSV file. So it will have a name for my my element, and then the protocol and the alarm template and the IP address and all the different settings that are available in the wizard as well. So it will be quite a wide CSV, you could say, with a lot of columns there. But the most interesting option this is used for, or why is this being used, that is to do bulk editing. You export your 100 elements, and then you can start modifying in Excel easily the name or the description or alarm templates or whatever you want. Or you create one element and you want to copy paste it like 100 times. Instead of going 100 times through that wizard, or doing 100 times right click on an existing element and duplicate it and changing the name. No, I just add one element, I export it into CSV, and then in Excel I add everything. The 100 elements, I define the 100 names, the 100 IP addresses, I'm happy. with the 100 names and 100 IP addresses. That's the only thing I need to do. All the other settings are okay, and I import it again. And that's the demo that I will do as well with the export and import in just a second. Then importing it again, let's take a look at that. That's our CSV file that we have. I'll do that immediately in an example, but there is one thing you need to know. If you are exporting, the first two columns are of crucial importance because they are the unique identifier to identify about which element you're talking. Here we're having the element name, and we have a Brussels IRD 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 IRDs. But how does it know about which element I'm talking if I'm changing the name? If I'm choosing, instead of a Brussels name, I say a Belgium IRD. So I'm changing the naming convention. How can DataMiner know about which element you're talking? Well, the only unique reference will be that DataMiner ID element ID. And that is throughout the DataMiner system, that is the case. That is the unique identifier of an element. So you don't touch those first two columns. Otherwise, DataMiner doesn't know anymore that you are editing this line. But you do touch that first column if you're copy-pasting. If you're copy-pasting and you only created row 3 here, you only created one element through the wizard, and then you do a copy-paste and you do it 5 times, then you should make sure that this is empty. Then DataMiner knows like, oh, IRD2, there's no element ID, so it's a new one. I'll create a new one, and it will automatically create a new for 2, 3, 4, 5, because those are empty. Why is that DataMiner ID still populated? Well, you can choose on which DataMiner it needs to be configured, but I would say you can also leave that one empty, because you have to be careful that you choose a correct DataMiner ID if you are still leaving that populated. So you can edit an existing IRD like we have here, IRD01. You can edit this one. You can add new ones, like 2, 3, 4, 5, but you can never delete. It's not possible to delete a row. If you delete a row, it's just not going to take it into account. It won't delete the actual elements. So be aware with the CSV export and import, you can only do editing, bulk editing, and bulk adding of elements. You can never do deleting. There you need to go through the UI. So you won't be able to make any mistakes for deleting all of a sudden a bunch of elements there. Okay, let's maybe do that first on our training platform. So let's go back to our training platform, and I do have here a view which has those 5 IRDs already. And let's say I want to do some bulk editing, or I want to add some more elements to that. So I added one with the wizards. I know that this one is correctly populated. I already maybe duplicated 5 times, and I need to do some more duplication. So how can I do that? You right click on the view. So you right click on the view export with all the elements in there. You go to actions, and then you go for export. And if you choose that export, you have those 2 options. Remember, the DM import, that's a full DataMiner import package that will be created with everything around it, the visuals, the protocols, the alarm templates, the trend template, whatever is needed for that view to move it to another system. I'm not interested in that. I want to do bulk editing and bulk adding. So I go for that CSV, the second option, and I leave it on CSV, and I leave it on CSV what I want to export and how I want to export. All right, let's export that just on my desktop, export data.csv. Let's save that. It has succeeded the export. Now let's open up that CSV in my Excel. So here I have my Excel. So you can see that it has a whole bunch of columns. If I move to the right, you will see there are many columns in there. And I should probably see also some the gold, silver, bronze things, but I don't have any. You have latitude, longitude, so there are some class properties probably already on there. Let me see, deployment, there, the class properties. So the gold, silver, bronze is there as well. So even those properties are there as well. But those are far away on the right-hand side. I don't need to worry about that. So you can see the most important is the DataMiner ID, element ID, and the name of the element that has been added in there. And all the other columns like the protocol, the alarm, trend template, and things like that. So if I want to change something, you can easily change it. For instance, let's maybe play around with that and add like a double dash for all my elements. My naming convention changed for one or another reason, and I want to change that just for fun. I'm changing something. Now, what I want to do as well, so I want to do some bulk editing, but I also want to duplicate a row. Be careful if you duplicate a row in Excel, you can take this small rectangle there and just drag it downwards. Yeah, that's cool, but you have to be careful with that because there are certain columns that might be unexpectedly going upwards here. Like here, the port number, this is should be on 0, and it starts incrementing. Also the IP address, well, typically the IP address, I would need to still specify the IP address of that element next to the name. So typically the name I would still need to modify, the name there. But also the IP address I would need to modify, but there are potentially other columns that are impacted. So be careful. I will Control Z my duplication action, and I will just do a Control C of one row and I go down and put a Control V there. So there are, as I said, two things I typically need to change. I will need to change the name to make it unique, like the 6, and typically the IP address, I would need to specify the IP address of that element as well. Remember, we need to make sure that the element ID, now I have twice the element ID 306 in there. That would not be a good idea to upload this thing to DataMiner because you would be editing twice the same element there. So that's not a good idea. So we need to make sure if we want to create a new element to at least remove the element ID, then DataMiner knows like, oh, that's a new one. I still need to create an element. And I would say also leave the DataMiner ID empty, then it will just create it on the DataMiner I'm uploading it to, that I'm connected to. Okay, so I did some changes to the previous elements and I created a new element. So I could do that like 100 times, creating new elements in this Excel. And then I just save it on my desktop. It's saved. And now I close my Excel. And now I can upload it again. So let's go back to right-clicking the export view that I have here with already 5 elements in there, single dash. They are in there with a single dash. Right-click, go for actions, and now I go for imports. So the import that I have is not a DM import, but it's a CSV import. So if I go for that CSV, I can select again my CSV on my desktop that I just edited a little bit, and I can click on open. I forgot to mention, but you need to check the progress. It will just throw the file to the server, and then it will do the necessary processing of that file and the CSV and all the things that it needs to do. You will be able to track the progress here in the information events. So I'll open up the information events so that we can see the progress there. Let's open up. So you can see already some things are passing by. And it's going fast. So editing is happening on a bunch of elements. You can also see that an element here, export 6, has been created and activated by the DataMiner system. So it finished, 6 succeeded, 0 failed, 0 for remote agents. So everything went fine. And the double dash is now everywhere there. And the 6 version has been added there as well. So that was a successful import that I did with some bulk editing and some new element that I created. Now you can say like, why is this element going into timeout and why are the others actually not in timeout? Well, you could see that we were actually polling like local hosts, but actually what we are not really polling in something, we are using the simulation. So there is a simulation possibility, and on this DataMiner agent we have some simulation files. And if you have those simulation files installed, you can just right click on an element, in this case this element. So currently I added it as a regular element, so it's effectively trying to poll and trying to find that that Philips IRD on that IP address. It doesn't find it, so it goes into timeout. So I would be able to verify with my stream viewer. It might take a little bit of time before a timeout is happening. I would see some timeouts happening there. Yes, indeed, timeouts. But I want to force it into a simulation mode, and you can do that if there are simulation files on your DataMiner system, which is the case for our training platform. You can right click on there and you go for Actions, Enable Simulation. And if you go for Enable Simulation, it will restart the element with that simulated option enabled, take the simulation file that is existing on the DataMiner system and reads, and I basically talk to that simulation file, and it reads out there what the left test level and the audio output level is and all of these things. So it does have some other settings as well that are being read from that simulation file. You can find more information on the simulation in the docs. Docs.dataminer.services has this all explained in the documentation as well. So that's how we are able to create that many of those elements on our system here. Okay, so that was a small trick there on that simulation. So we imported back our CSV. We first exported it, did some bulk editing and some adding of a new element, and then we imported that, and that was successful. You could also go for importing an that was actually our sorry, I was a little bit confused there. That was our import that I had to mention before I did the exercise. So we do the import, we select the CSV, and we see the changes, and we track that in our information events. What is happening there. So we saw how many, we had 6 succeeded. And of course, we can also do the import of the DM package, the import package. That is a full package. If we select a full package, then we get again the possibility on the receiving system, on your production system, you import the package. So you select that package, and then you can still here select what you want to take out of that package. So maybe you in the export you defined some Visio files as well, and here maybe you say like, oh, I don't want to include the Visio files or something like that. That's still possible. Or maybe I only have 4 IRDs here in this site, so I'll disable one of those elements. So that's also possible. So during the import, you're also still possible to tweak what needs to be taken from the package onto your system here. So remember, there are 2 ways of exporting, just a simple CSV or a full package. A full package is to move things. A CSV is more for bulk editing and adding. Okay, so the exercise is something we already did. We did the CSV export and import, and we added already a system or an element onto our DataMiner agent. So in this module, we took a closer look on how to add an element in there. So I think it was very useful to have this exercise to play around with some bulk editing as well. But typically, for most cases, we can just right-click an element, go for edit or go for add a new element and use that wizard. And there we know how to handle that now. I hope you enjoyed this session, and see you in the next one where we will more add templates to our element.